Welcome back to Learning with Merit. Today we're going to take a look at HTML, and this is a part of making a web page. So we're going to work with the hypertext markup language. So covered in this video, we're going to look at getting started with HTML, what are tags, what are elements, what are attributes, and how to do some inline styles with CSS. And of course over here, just to make things a little fun, we've also got the HTML for this simple little page that I made. We've got the getting started and everything for the outline over here. So here we are on our desktop, and we're wanting to get started with HTML, or the hypertext markup language, to start making a website. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new folder. Now I can do this on the desktop, or I can do this anywhere inside of my file system that I would like. It doesn't really matter. The desktop is really just an easy place to do it. And here I've got desktop with some folders and a little image there. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to create a new folder here on the desktop, and you'll see that it popped up over here on the left as well. And I'm going to call this one My Website. All right, and what this is for is it's going to be my container, or you can think of it like a workspace. This is where I'm going to stick all the files and folders and everything for my website. Now I'm going to add a new file in here. We're going to call this a text document. Now every piece of code that we're going to write is going to be a text file, but it's a special type of text file. In this case, we're going to name this file index.html. And it's going to ask us if we want to change the file name extension. That's fine. Just click yes, and you'll see that we now have our HTML document there. You also want to make sure, you may not see it, but when you click View up here on your File Explorer, you should have item checkboxes, file name extensions, and hidden items checked. That way you can see the file extension and change it just like I did, as well as the checkboxes and anything else we need to work with. You'll also see that the default browser here is what the icon appears for, is the icon that appears for our HTML document. I could also go to Open With, and I could pick any of the other browsers that we also have available. I can also edit this file, and there are lots of different ways that we can edit it. The built-in way that comes with Windows is we can go to Open With down here and choose another app, and we could actually open this. We click on More Apps down here. We can actually open this with Notepad, and we could edit it with Notepad. I'll click OK, and you'll see I just have a blank document here as well. So Notepad's sort of the built-in way to do it, but it's not pretty or very easy. And of course, this icon we could change if we opened it up with different things. But now that I've created this index.html file, if I double click on it, you'll see that it opens to a blank page in whatever my default browser is. In this case, it is Chrome. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. So now we have an HTML file that will open in a browser, and we have a simple way to edit it. We could use Notepad, but maybe there's a better way to edit it. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize File Explorer for now. We're going to open up Chrome, and we're going to look at some other ways that we can actually edit files. So there are a bunch of different available editors out there, and we're going to look through some of them. One of them is called Vim. This is not for the faint of heart. Vim can be a very complex editor to use, but it's one of those out there, and it's just a text editor that has some features that allows you to edit text, and it's a little easier than using something like Notepad. We got another one that's similar to Vim. This one's called Emacs, and also another very popular text editing software. Tends to show up on Linux and that sort of thing more often. Then we have NeoVim for sort of new Vim, and this is based on old Vim and has some new features and things like that you can use. This one is called Nano and tends to be built into most Linux distributions, and so when you're working on the command line, you can open up Nano and text edit there. This one has an ad in front of it. This one's called Adobe Dreamweaver. It's not very popular anymore, and mostly because it's proprietary and you have to pay for it, but it is another option for text editing. Then we have a big one, JetBrains. All of the JetBrains IDEs, some of them I believe you have to pay for, but they're also pretty popular IDEs. Here we have one for HTML and CSS called WebStorm that seems to be a fairly impressive one that people tend to like. We also have Notepad++, which is another great option. It looks sort of like this right here. I like Notepad++. I don't use it as much as one of these others up here that I'm going to show you, but I do like Notepad++ as well. There's also Sublime Text Editor. I also like this one. This one's pretty cool. And of course you can download it for Windows. But here we've arrived at the one we're going to use because primarily it's the most popular. The most people tend to use this one, and Visual Studio Code is a very nice text editing program that we can use. And of course we could also make it into what is called an IDE, or integrated development environment, if we really want to go that far. So it's pretty easy for beginners to get into, but it's also very usable for people who are looking to do more. So we're going to use VS Code, and of course I already have it downloaded and installed here, and I even have it pinned to my desktop. So we're going to go ahead and minimize this. And here we have my website. I'm going to go ahead and double click on this, and here I'm going to double click on index.html. Now you might be wondering, why do we call it index.html? Well, by default, whenever I go to a website, or my website for example, it will be the first file that gets opened whenever I go to a folder. So you'll see right here I have the My Website folder, and of course this isn't a website, this is just a file path on my computer, but I go to My Website, and then the file that gets opened up would be index.html. And if I had other folders, the index.html file is what would show up first. And this is sort of because the way that books of course work. You have an index which sort of shows you everything that you might be able to find. And this is sort of where it comes from. It's not exactly the best analogy anymore because of the way that websites work, but in general, it applies. And you can even look at some of these others. For example, like this right here, there's going to be a file that's being opened by default on each of these websites, and even though you don't see it in the URL, it could be the index.html file. Now, it doesn't have to be called index.html, it's just convention. So now that we have this going here, and of course we have a blank page to work with, how the heck do I edit it? I've talked about several different editors, but now we need to actually get one open. So I'm going to come down here, and you see VS Code down at the bottom. I'm going to open this up. Now if you're a first-time user, you may not see something quite like this, but you will see something similar. You should be able to get to this welcome page fairly easily. I'm going to go ahead and make it full screen. And now that I have this here, I'm going to go to File up here at the top, and I'm going to go to Open Folder. And that's going to bring me to some part of my File Explorer, wherever I was last if I use this. I'm going to go to Desktop here, find My Website, and click Select Folder. And that's going to open it up for me. And of course, if I have a different folder I want to use, that's the one that I'm going to use. It's going to ask me if I trust the authors. I do, mostly because I'm the one creating it. I'm going to get rid of this Welcome tab now by exiting out. And now over here on the left-hand side, I have a File Explorer built into my VS Code. And I just have a single file, which I am going to open up there. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this over, to my right. And we will see that this file over here is ready to go. So anytime I make an update over here, I'm going to have to save it, and I will have to reload this page to see any changes that we make, and let's get into that. So here we have our editor, and of course we have the page over here that we're looking at, and I have my index.html file open. Now, hypertext markup language is our standard language for creating and structuring these web documents. Right? It's going to use something called tags, and these tags are going to have things called attributes, and they're going to create the elements of a web page. And all of these words are important for us to know. And so the first thing I'm going to put on here is something called a comment. It's always good to know how to comment your code. So here I've used 2 angle brackets, and inside that we have an exclamation point and 2 dashes or 2 minus symbols, and we're going to say this is an HTML comment. Comments are good because with any type of code, it's always a good idea to comment what you do, especially if you're planning on coming back to it and doing stuff like that. And if I save that and I come back over here to the other side and I reload, you'll notice that when it reloads we don't see anything because this is just a comment. This is hidden. And I could also take this and I could put it on a new line, and I could come down here and I could do like that, and this is still that same comment, so I can make multi-lines the same way that I make a single line. So this is how we add annotations or notes to our code. It's not going to be displayed in the browser, and they tend to be ignored when the web page is rendered. So they're really good little explanations for your code. Let's get started on the actual HTML part outside of this. So I'm going to add another comment here, and there are 3 things we are going to talk about that are super important. One of them is called a tag. We're going to look at tags, we're going to look at elements, and we're going to look at attributes for those elements. And then lastly, we'll actually look at something called Inline Styles, which is getting into a little bit of CSS. The first thing I'm going to add to my page, we're going to add some tags here. The first tag I'm going to add is this one right here. It is, whoops, got to spell it right, doctype HTML. So a tag is going to have a left angle bracket and a right angle bracket, and this is a single tag, and this defines the document as an HTML document. Then I'm going to add another tag. Let's add another one, HTML. And you will see that now I have 2 tags. I have an open HTML tag and a close HTML tag. Everything in between these 2 tags is the HTML document that we're looking at. Let's add some more tags. Here is one called a head tag. Now the head tag, it stands for header, and it's going to be a bunch of information that doesn't show up in the page body, but may be information that is necessary for the browser to know, or information for all kinds of different things. But this is where our metadata, or our information that should go in the header, is going to be. One of those is going to be called title. So we're going to add the title tags. We'll leave those right there. And so you see we have a title open tag and a title close tag. We're also going to add a body tag. So this is for our page body. Pretty much everything that we want to display on the page is going to occur in between these 2 body tags. Now we've got some example tags that we might use. One that's going to be important that may not seem very important right now is called the div tag. The div tag is a container, and that container is used to group things. So I'm going to group a couple of things. I'm going to group a heading here. So I have a heading open tag and a heading close tag that just showed up. And I'm going to add a paragraph tag as well. And we'll throw that in there. And so now I have a grouping. I'm going to go ahead and copy these and make 3 of them, just like that. And actually, let's throw in one more, because there's one more thing that I want to add to the page that we're making. So what you'll see here is that I have made some groupings using the div tags, and all the div tags are our containers. One of the other things you may notice that I'm doing with the tags is I am indenting those tags and adding extra spaces in certain places. All this is about is ensuring that the code is readable in some way to me and to other people. I could actually write all of this HTML on exactly 1 line and it would still work. But because I want it to be readable to people, instead of writing it all on 1 line, right, I'm going to write it in a way that maybe is a little more readable. So that's tags. So now that we know about tags, we have, of course, open tags, close tags, and remember the open tags always come with a close tag, and if you see right here, hopefully you noticed the / that goes with every close tag there. So now we're going to talk about HTML elements. Now, a tag is used to define an HTML element. So I'm going to come down here to title, for example, and I'm going to call this, let's call this LWM, because we're learning with Merit, right? So this right here, if I take the open tag, the content of the tag, and the close tag, I have an HTML element. So this right here is an element. So is all of these other tags. So here we got H1 and H1. I'm actually going to add to that. We're going to call this Learning with Merit right there. If I can type. And so now we have an H1 element. I am also going to add, in fact, I'm going to hit Control B right here to get rid of that so we have a little bit more space. We're going to call this Learning About HTML. So I have an element there, and I have an element there. And then, of course, this whole div tag is also an element. So one of the ways that we can describe the difference between these is we say that the div element is the parent element to the h1 and p elements here. Or we could also say that the h1 element is a child element of this div element. So pretty simple there, but the elements are the tags plus the contents of the tags that go with them. So we're learning with Merit. First one I'm going to put up here is HTML in that heading. In the next heading, let's do CSS because we're going to learn about CSS as well. And the third heading, I'm going to add JavaScript just like that. And I'm going to save this. So now it's time to take a look at what is going on. Whenever I save that and I reload the page over here, so now we have that big heading up there, Learning with Merit, and then our little paragraph that says Learning about HTML. Then we have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now you don't really see some of the other tags that are going on yet because they are going to be a little more important when we start working with other parts of the code. So the div tag, for example, will be more useful when we start using CSS because grouping these different elements together will allow us to change how we display them on the page. And so div tags are actually very important because they allow you to group things. And grouping things will make your life a lot easier when you're trying to style the web page. All right, so let's say in each of them, I'm just going to throw in some filler, some words here, some words. I'm going to copy that to my other paragraphs because we can go in and add what we want to about those later. So this is elements. They're pretty simple. We add the different tags plus their content and we get an element. Remember that if we have an element that contains other elements, the elements inside, like H1 here, are called child elements, and the outer element is called a parent element. So for example, the body element here that contains everything from that body element or that body tag to this body tag, these are all child elements of the body element. Right? And then of course as we go down step, step, step. Right? It's sort of like a staircase. So that's why the indentation matters. It helps you read it, helps you understand what is a part of what. And then of course adding extra spaces also make a big difference. This LWM title over here, if I make this a little bigger, you can see right here on the title bar in our tab, we have the LWM right there. Okay, so now that we've got that, we understand basic elements. Okay, so now we know that elements in our HTML define the structure and content that we have in a web page, and we can use them for a lot of different things. And they use these tags like div or h1 to specify the different type of content that we have based on the text or other things that are in them. Now we need to talk about attributes of these tags. And attributes quite often are used for changing the properties or the values or the things that are going on inside of the tags. So I'm going to come down here. We're going to create a new div, new little container. And in this container, I'm going to create a link. And we're going to use a tag called an anchor tag. So it starts with an A. And the reason this is called the anchor tag is because we have anchor text for not an HTML, for a hyperlink, for example. So I'm going to create a link. And this link, we're going to do a href. We're going to make this link to a website that's very useful to us. So a href here, href, this part, is called the attribute. And what the attribute is going to do is it's some property of this element, and it's going to change what's going on here. So href is for a reference or a hyperlink reference, and inside of the quotes, we're going to add a link. Now, the link that I'm going to add is to a website called W3 Schools. Now, W3 Schools is a great website because it has a bunch of tutorials, including HTML, and it has all kinds of things. We can look over here and we can see all the different things that they can show us about. And you can try it yourself in their little editors and all sorts of stuff like that. And they give you some example code to work with. This is an all-around great site for learning, and I recommend you use it to expand your knowledge of HTML. But here we're going to take this. I'm going to copy the URL and the address up here, and I'm going to paste it here. So now that I have that link, I'm going to close my open tag, and you'll see that I have a close tag here. And of course, this is our anchor element, the whole thing. And now I can put inside, in between the two tags here, I can put what I want it to say. So I'm going to say W3 schools and then link. So we know that's our W3 schools link. So I'm going to hit save right there. We need to come back over here and look for my web page. So here we have this right here. I'm going to reload, and you'll see, oop, I've changed some things. So there's some words, and there is our link. If I click on it, it takes me to W3 schools. If I go back, it's going to take me back to this. So now I have an attribute for that. Maybe I want to add an image. Now, images are going to be pretty interesting. So I'm going to do, in this one, we're going to open up a tag, img. Image is an interesting tag because it doesn't actually have a close tag, but it does have two attributes we need to know about. One is called source. Source is the source of the image that we are going to use, and it's important that we know where that image is at. So you'll see in my folder currently that image is not there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. We're going to go to our desktop. So here's desktop. Click on that. There's the image that I'm going to use. So what I want to do is move that into my website so that it's easy for me to access. Now, there are other ways to do this, but for right now, the simplest way is to just make sure it's in the same folder as your HTML document. So there's my image.png, and I've moved it into the correct folder. I'm going to minimize that, and you'll see, look, it pulled up right there. So there's the image that I'm going to use. So I'm going to save what we got so far, and now I'm going to add this. So inside source, I'm going to type image, and you'll see that it's popping up for me right there in VS Code, image.png. So now that I've got that, I'm going to do another attribute. This one is called alt. I'm going to say equals, and this is going to define what that image displays. I'm going to call it HTML, and then dash CSS dash JS dash logo. And I'm going to do that because this is for lots of different things like screen readers, for example, all kinds of little tools that are used for helping with this image and web pages in general. So now I close that off, and you'll notice again, this does not have a close tag. There is no close tag for my image tag. But once again, you'll see here that in my anchor tag, I have the href attribute. In image, I have the source attribute and the alt attribute. And these things in quotes are the values for those attributes. So now if I save this and come over here and reload this page, you'll see there's my giant HTML picture because I didn't change the size of it. Let's actually make it a little bit smaller. So I can add another attribute. I could do width equals, and let's make it, I don't know, let's make it 500 pixels. So 500 px like that. I'll save that, come over here and reload, and my image is a little bit smaller now so we can see it as we're working. There's also a height attribute. There's lots of different attributes, and I encourage you to go and look what they are up. It's literally impossible to go over all of the different tags and attributes in one video, but this is a good starting point. So now we've got our link there, and of course we have an image there. We could even do this. This is a cool one. If I take this image tag right here, I move it up to inside of this anchor tag, and I paste. Now I've got this. I'll actually make this full screen for you. Now I've got this image tag right here that's sitting inside of this anchor tag, and I have just made an image that's a link. So I'm going to save that. We are going to switch to our full document here. I'll reload, and you'll see that link went away, but now suddenly when I hover over this, if I click on it, boom, it takes me to that. So now I have an image that's actually a link as well, which is a very cool little thing that we could do. So now that we've got that, we have figured out how to do anchor tags and images. We've figured out how to do headings and div tags, and we've talked about attributes. Let's throw in another attribute. This is an attribute that pretty much every single tag is going to have. This one is called style, and we're going to talk about style here in just a second. All right, so now we're going to look at some inline styles, and here we have our style attribute for this div tag. and I have some quotes ready to go, and we're going to add some things to this. So this is where we're actually going to add some CSS. Now I want you to remember style is still a part of HTML. This thing right here is still an attribute for HTML. But inside these quotes, we're going to write some text, and that text is going to be CSS code that will tell the div how we want to style it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by simply creating a style that will show us the little containers. So I'm going to do border, and then we're going to add a colon, and I'm going to say I want a 2-point solid black border like that. And I'm going to add a semicolon at the end. We're going to save that. If we go to our new thing here, we reload, and you'll see, whoop, look at there at the top. So I've created a 2-point solid black border around that first div. If we go back, I'm going to copy this, and let's add that to our other divs. Remember, this is inline, so we're adding it directly to those containers. Now, the reason those containers are so useful is you may notice that it also had that line around the container, and that contained the things inside of it. So whatever we do to style the container will have some effect on the stuff inside of the container. So we're going to save that, and we're going to switch here again, and we will Control R to reload, and you'll see now we have a line around all of our different elements here that we want. Of course, it shows us what's going on. This is going to be more helpful when we look at CSS as well, because we can style this and make it look different and organize things in different ways, but those containers are going to be super, super helpful to what we're doing. So we can add some more stuff. There are all kinds of things that we can add if we want to change the color of things. In fact, let's just go ahead and change all of the body. Let's do style for the body. And we're going to say here, let's do background color. So background dash color, whoop, not color. And we're going to add a color. So a lot of different colors that we can add. One, we could do RGB here. RGB values are going to be decimal values from 0 to 255. So we could do RGB 0, 0, 0, and that gives us dark black as it'll get. We could do 255, 255, 255. That gives us as white as it'll get. If we do 255, 0, 0, we get all red, so that's the red in RGB. If we do 0, 255, 0, we get, there we go, green as it'll get. If we do 0, 0, 255, we get as blue as it'll get, and all, of course, all in between. And if you're using VS Code, you can actually hover over this, and you can pick a different value, and it will input it for you, so you can make as custom a color as you would like. You could also, you don't have to use RGB in the decimal version. We can use RGB in the hex version, so we have to use the hashtag for hex. 000000 is going to be all black. FF is going to be all white. If I do FF0000, that's red. If I do 00FF00, that's all green. And then 00FF or 0000FF is going to be all blue. So we can use hexadecimal values as well, and the color picker will also work for that one. So whichever one you are most comfortable with. And then it even knows some regular values, like if I type in white, it will go ahead and add white for me as well. Maybe I want to change the text color now. Let's actually change this to a black background, and then we will change the text color. So I'm going to do color dash, actually, sorry, not dash, colon, and I'm going to add the color that I want. I don't know, let's try green. Let's make it look crazy. Ooh, I don't really like that green, so I'm going to try the kind of green that I'm looking for. Let's do hashtag 00FF00. Let's just try a sort of neon looking green. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to save that. Let's see what it does to our web page. So I reload that, and look, so now we've got an all black background, and our text has become this pre-neon green looking color. Of course, my image is still the same, even though the black background is still there. Maybe I want to change the color of our border to green as well. So we'll do 00, do 00FF, and you see it pops up there, so I can do that a little bit faster. I'll actually copy this. And one of the things you'll notice here is you may be going like, man, you have to copy and paste that and copy and paste that. That's got to be really irritating. Later on in another video when we talk about CSS, it's going to be a lot easier because there's ways to group this information and change it all in one whenever you want to. So let's go back to this, reload, and there is our neon green looking borders on a black background. Very interesting looking website so far. So that's pretty much it for our different things in HTML. Here we have a basic HTML document that will show a few things with a few different tags. I recommend for sure that you go to this HTML tutorial here and you learn about all of the different tags. There is an excellent reference. There's a tag list here that you can look at. They have all kinds of examples and more things for you to learn, but this is a good introduction to what you're doing. Remember, just for a quick summary, we have tags like HTML. Each tag has an open and a close tag. So here's our close tag for this. The close tag has a /. A tag and all of its content is an element. So here if we look at like H1 for example, H1 and its content and its closing tag is an element. We have parent elements. So here we have the div that contains other elements as well. So this is a parent element to the H1 and P elements here. We have attributes that are a part of the elements. The attributes are going to go inside of the open tag, and they are going to have a specific name and then a value that we give them, like style, for example, is an attribute. Or if we look at some other examples down here, like a href, href is going to be an attribute of the anchor tag. Or if we look at image, we have src for source and alt. These are going to be also attributes. Even we got one more there, width as well, are going to be attributes of the image tag. So it's important we know this terminology because it makes it a lot easier for us to work with this. But hopefully this gives you a good introduction to using HTML and working with web pages. Thank you for watching Learning with Merit.